We have reporter extraordinaire Peter Gay Coombs will tell us about the top stories making the news this week. Peter Gay, you got some really good stuff, I know.
We definitely have some good stuff today, Edu Enka. Today, we're looking at the changing global landscape of trade and whether it can and will be called globalization going forward. This as the very countries, those of the first world countries, such as the United States and Britain, who put forward the concept of globalization, are redefining it amid the new push of ideologies such as populism, nationalism, and protectionism, which are gaining fresh momentum coming out of the new U.S. president's stance. And he's chanting slogans such as America First, take our jobs and businesses back. And on Monday, as you know, he signed an executive order which pulled the United States out of the Trans-Pacific trade deal signed only last year, which he says is for the benefit of U.S. workers. Now, President Trump has also signaled his intention to renegotiate the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, with Canada and Mexico, which has been in place for about 23 years now. And again, he says this is in order to put America first. Also on this anti-globalization push agenda is Brexit, of course, and also fueling it is the newly installed leader of the newly installed British Prime Minister Theresa May, who told the European Union last week in outlining her Brexit map that no deal is better than a bad deal. And we know that Mrs. May is supposed to meet with the US president this Friday, where we can't speak to the substance of those talks, but we can speculate based on recent developments. And so the question as it now stands, Edu Enka, is what do all these political machinations mean for developing nations such as us here in the British Virgin Islands? And these issues were featured at the just ended BVI Business Outlook on Scrub Island, where panelists such as Dan Mitchell from the Cato Institute examined the issue of global taxation and the new regulations being put in place which are impacting low tax jurisdictions such as the BVI and restricting commercial banks and their business practices. And another presenter, Mark Pragnell from Capital Economics Limited in London, which is also executing that study looking at the value of the financial services sector here in the BVI to the global economy. He made the point that going forward, countries such as the BVI will have to push to ensure that their voices are heard in this discourse about globalization.
What might matter more for BVI is not whether the U.S. economic engine pulls BVI along in its wake, it's whether or not Trump is like George W. Bush. And I'm specifically talking about the issue of international tax competition and the way that BVI and other low-tax jurisdictions have been unfairly persecuted by the OECD. During the Bush years, we didn't quite get Bush to completely deep six that initiative, but the mere fact that the U.S. didn't embrace it like it did under the Bill Clinton administration basically meant it was stymied. You can't have OPEC without Saudi Arabia. You can't have a global tax cartel without the U.S. So we can get Trump to basically tell the tax-free bureaucrats in Paris at the OECD, no, you can't be persecuting jurisdictions for the supposed crime of low taxes in a friendly business environment. I think that might give you guys some breathing room where you're not going to be harassed as much. Now, of course, you've already, in effect, had to surrender your financial privacy. You've already had to sign all these one-sided TIA agreements. So you've already lost a lot in terms of what's happened over the last 8 years. But keep in mind, these high-tax countries are all going down the fiscal toilet slowly but surely. And so their desire to pressure you and to turn you into fiscal colonies is not going to abate unless the U.S. government changes its position.
In terms of what it means for the overseas territories, though, Brexit is both a positive and a potential negative. On the positive side, if the UK wants to extend greater trade with the rest of the world and it wants to look beyond the European Union, wants to look beyond the single market, then it's got to find ways of doing that. And what the overseas territories, and especially what the BVI does, what the Crown Dependencies, Jersey, Guernsey and the Isle of Man do, what they do is they help the UK make bridges with the rest of the world. a lot of UK trade, an enormous amount of UK investment, both inward and outward, is facilitated using BVI business companies, is facilitated using the structures and the institutions that are in the Channel Islands. So there's a positive there. If the UK wants to look beyond the EU, actually you can be very, very helpful to them. The danger is, unless the overseas territories, unless the Crown dependencies speak up, there could be a dangerous deal done, and that's the risk. So I think it's very pleasing that you've got a government here that is engaging with Westminster.
What's interesting to me is that the pushback by the leaders of globalization against globalization, it seems like somehow globalization is not working for them, because the manufacturing jobs that is needed for their economy and for their country, men and women, to be successful and have a good quality of life is all being shipped to places like China and India by, I might add, their multinational corporations. So they're their own worst enemy, and I think Trump and perhaps many of the others now supporting Trump realize that. I think it bodes well for us as a country, as the one gentleman in the BVI conference said, that we are a facilitator, and if Trump is not going to penalize or he's going to support low tax jurisdictions, then certainly we will get a reprieve from the attack, as he said, by the OECD and other international or mother countries, if so to speak. We have been talking here about nationalism for a very long time, and it's the same situation that we are encountering now, where we are saying we cannot allow multinationals to come in, take over our businesses, our business opportunities, give jobs to who they want to give jobs to, and basically marginalize the people of the Virgin Islands. You have people are angry about that. But now here we have the President of the United States saying we cannot have companies taking their manufacturing jobs and taking their business opportunities and taking them overseas to places like India and China. So you could almost say that we're on the same page with Donald Trump. That's what's making it interesting, you know. And I think they're absolutely right. Globalization only can work if there is a level playing field. And I think what America and Britain and the rest of Europe wanted, they wanted to have their cake and eat it too. You know, they didn't want a level playing field. And now they found out that China particularly and India have outwitted them in the globalization strategy, and now they have some pushback. They have lost their manufacturing jobs to low labor jurisdictions.
So, yes.
Yeah, and so now they're saying, well, we need to protect our nationals. Yeah, well, you know, being in the Virgin Islands, we need to protect our nationals too. We need to protect our, you know, our resources and our economic growth and development, and all those business opportunities need to come to us here in the Virgin Islands, else we will be just marginalized to labor and consumers. And I mean, I don't think that that's acceptable to any country. So it's certainly interesting to see the development, and I think that what we are doing now, what the government is doing in positioning itself in Asia to capitalize on that pushback, the hypocrisy of America and Britain will certainly be pointed out. And we have a good footing to stand on and to springboard into the global economy and improve our financial services markets, particularly in Asia, China and India, where they're becoming, the leading economic players in the world, and that would be an additional market for us to take advantage of if we could get Britain off our backs with this beneficial ownership registry. So I'm looking forward to the future with with Trump. As much as you might not like him, he's certainly a nationalist. I mean, he appears to be a nationalist.
Yes.
My question is he a nationalist or a white nationalist? Where his decision making is going to be based on the best interest of the nationals of America or the best interest of the white people of America. That's where my concern lies, because he has spewed out some racial epithets and some xenophobia and sexism, and he's got some of that tinge of that old boy mentality that seemed to have come out during the campaign. So we have to wait and see what his policies and his words, his policies, and his actions come together so we could really determine who he is. And of course, he's just withdrawn the TPP deal, and although it may have benefited the American corporations, it certainly would have hurt American workers and those manufacturing jobs that he's trying to bring back to the American shores. So it's a lot going on. It's going to be an exciting 4 years.
Interesting times.
Interesting times.
Yes.
But I'm glad that he's espousing this nationalism, because we certainly need to be more nationalist in our approach to doing business, because globalization is not going to work for us unless you could have everybody have a equal opportunity, a level playing field. We are going to, the developing countries are going to be taken advantage of. We're going to be pushed around. Unless we could unite and come together and make a stand, we're going to be pushed around and relegated to consumers and laborers, and that's my belief, and that's my fear. Good stuff.
To tap into that point that you were making about the emergence of Asia as a global economic power, specifically India and China, more so China. The Premier made a visit to China last year, and at that BVI Outlook conference, he spoke about how it is that our relations with China, via China using our structures, can not only benefit them but help to enhance the BVI economy and help in that diversification plan for the BVI economy. And it is said, he also spoke of this new commercial bank that's supposed to come to help resolve this correspondent banking crisis, and it's expected that bank will be affiliated to the Bank of China. And funny thing, Edu Enka, that we should point out, which probably many of our viewers are already aware of, at the World Economic Forum recently, usually you would expect the Western leaders to be chanting globalization and its benefits and the fact that we must stick with it. But it was the president of China who highlighted the importance of this. Here's what he said. He said that the war and conflict is responsible for the world's economic problems, not globalization. And to quote him, he said, "No one will emerge as a winner in a trade war. Pursuing protectionism is just like locking oneself in a dark room. Wind and rain might be kept outside, but so are light and air." And remember too that many are also of the view that this big pullout that President Trump is championing from the TPP will provide new economic activities for China, because the Trans-Pacific Trade Deal was supposed to put a curb on China's economic prowess globally and in that part of the world. And two of the presenters at the Economic Outlook Conference, I want to go back to them quickly, Edu Enka. They also have some ideas about how this anti-globalization pushback will play out and what is necessary to resolve it.
The US and the Western world, to me, seems to be in a defensive crouch. Russell said earlier, globalization seems not to be working for everyone. That's exactly right.
I think the first thing that needs to happen is people need to stop being so negative about populism. Effectively, what populism has been if the middle classes and the lower middle classes and the working classes of Europe and North America saying, hang on a minute, our prosperity hasn't grown as fast as others. If Europe, if the UK, if America can sort out its internal policy to actually redistribute a little bit, then populism is gone. However, these policies don't come overnight. And what we do have is we do have effectively over 2017 what looks to be a whole series of key elections in Europe after the Trump election in the US, which will start to mean that quite possibly you will have quite a shift away from pro-globalization, pro-international mobility, pro-trade governments towards ones which I don't think will become necessarily hugely protectionist, but will start to think twice about, hang on a minute, should we have open borders in the way which we've used to have them?
My view is, instead of hiding from these trends, globalization, what's going on in the Middle East, Russia, the rise of China and India, we need to understand the countries we're dealing with, have some empathy for them, understand their challenges, and especially with a country like China and with Russia, be clear about where our lines are and where we can hold out an open hand to cooperate.
Andrew Encom?
Well, there again, you know, the America and Britain and Europe, they come at the world, I think, from a arrogant perspective. As the one lady said there, instead of trying to form real relationships, they come from a position of superiority, and they should be dictating the pace. And now that they're getting pushed back, and now they're being outwitted at their own game, it is becoming a problem. Now, internally, as the gentleman was saying, internally they have problems with greed. You know, the corporations are making vast fortunes. I mean, when you got one individual that possesses $700 billion, you know, and you still have kids that can't get a meal and can't get a good education, you know, the injustice is glaring. So, you know, they need to redistribute, as he was saying, some of the wealth in order for the playing field to become level. So that people could feel, well, if we are going to be globalists, then the resources would have to be redistributed so all the people in the globe have a decent quality of life. You can't have $700 billion and then and have millions of people starving all over the world and expect everybody to be happy. I mean, it just doesn't work. You know, so they need to start rethinking. I think Europe and North America particularly needs to start rethinking their global position and start acknowledging and realizing that the world is changing, the developing world is becoming developed, and you just can't walk over people coming to their country with your guns drawn, take their resources, do what you want to do with it, and have their people in poverty. The new crop of leaders are no longer going to allow that. And so, you know, and I know they got the big weapons and got the big guns, but it's being proven that the nuclear weapons are useless at this point. You know,
won't be enough anymore. Yeah,
because they got some people in the world that's taking the fight to them. And they need to realize that they can't continue with their behavior, their aggression, and just taking up what they want and using it how they want and having a high quality of life, a high standard of living, while the rest of the world is starving. It's just not going to work. Well, that's quite it's quite interesting, Peter. Good story.